Hey, this is Empress Zingha. What's going on? Today we are going to be sitting down inside of a new space. You probably know of it, the Queen's Park Art Gallery. And we will be sitting, or rather standing, talking with Janice Whittle here in the Queen's Park Gallery, talking about arts, culture, Bajan visual arts. Let me find out what's going on. Well, first of all, this is now my official time coming back into the Queen's Park Art Gallery space. I took a peek at Daphne Joseph Hackett during Carrie Festa. Could you tell me a little bit now before we get to 2017, how it was before Adam was a lad, like me, cause I didn't boat here. How was the gallery space created? What was the concept for having a gallery space here in Barbados?
Well, the actual gallery is in Queen's House, and this was the home of the command of the British forces during the 18th century. And the actual gallery space is where his living room was.
Okay.
So when, in 1909, Lady Gilbert Carter, who was the wife of the then Governor Sir Gilbert Carter, she designed Ilaro Court. She had an interest in the visual arts. She designed the Ilaro Court. She designed the monument on the esplanade to the memory of somebody. She designed the grounds of Queen's Park. So she decided that it would be good if she was very public spirited if we had an urban park.
Okay.
Because in Bridgetown there was no park, and there still is no park besides Queen's Park. So she laid out the park, and lots of the little monuments that you see she actually designed and had made, and it opened on the 10th of June 2009 to great fanfare, and everyone came out in their finery. And eventually, all of this led to this site being a meeting place for people in town, because it's somewhere where you could sit around, you could chat, you could meet your friends, you could arrange to meet people on the clock tower. And I can only go back to when I was a child. The big thing that Queen's Park meant to me when I was a child is the annual industrial and agricultural exhibition. And when that was coming up, remember, there was no video, there was no TV, when I was really a little child when this started. And you would have this one big event at Christmas. You always get new clothes, new shoes, and you would have apples and grapes. Now, apples and grapes were only available in Barbados at Christmas. The look of shock. They were only available in Barbados at Christmas, and part of the big thrill of the exhibition for me as a child, and I would have been maybe about 6, that kind of age that I'm remembering, 6, 7, is you would get toffee apples on sale. So they were big excitements, and you would be there from day to night, and you would see all these things. But for me, the most exciting thing, beside the toffee apples and the grapes and the new clothes, was the children's exhibition. Because this actual building and the steel shed, as far as my memory serves me, always had in children's art. So
from what ages?
I don't remember those kinds of details, but I know when I was older, when I was maybe like about 10 or so, no, not as old as 10, before 10, I actually had work in the children's exhibition. My own work was in it, so this was a big honor. And of course, big thrill. You rush to see it, your friends' work and that type of thing. So it was always a place for art. And what I discovered subsequently as an art historian is that the rooms upstairs were always used as a meeting place for what eventually became the Barbados Arts Council.
Okay.
And the pioneer artists like Goldie White, Aileen Hamilton, and people like that, they held classes. And various younger artists attended. And apart from the classes, people would meet and chat. And this eventually became the Arts Council, which ended up in Pelican, what is now Pelican Craft Center. And it's the oldest arts organization in Barbados. It predates the NCF by many, many years. Yeah, so they were going in the 40s, 50s, that type of time.
Were there other people as well who were a part of the life of the Queen's Park Gallery?
Yes, the Barbados Arts Council was not just visual arts as it is today. There was literary arts because John Wickham When I had my first exhibition at the Barbados Arts Council, he was president of the Barbados Arts Council. He is well known as a writer. There were musicians, so people would gather, and all the art forms would be represented in the Barbados Arts Council, and eventually it became a visual arts space more so. And I think upstairs you would have poetry readings and that type of thing, but I know less about that. I mean, this is, for me, history of art as opposed to lived experience, because I would not have been part of those meetings and so on. So this place, as I said, was always a space where there was visual arts happening. Upstairs, it was not the gallery itself was used for the exhibition, for displaying of art as an art exhibition space. But where it really came into people's minds as a big space for art exhibitions was after Elombe Motley became the director of the National Cultural, the first director of the National Cultural Foundation. And the gallery was used in those early days. Well, the foundation didn't exist until after Carifesta. Yes. But during Carifesta in 1981, this was the site of one of the Masters exhibitions. And the artist who was here, and that I remember distinctly, was Edna Manley, who is the pioneer of Jamaican art and the mother of contemporary Jamaican art. So that was one of the big things, the fact that we had Carifesta, and Carifesta brought out this awareness of the kind of work that was taking place in other parts of the Caribbean. Because even though we're so close, and this is true even today, even though we're geographically so close, it is expensive to go from one place to the other. Somebody told me it is as expensive to go to St. Kitts as it is to go to Atlanta. Yes, apparently so. So this prohibits the average person from traveling very much. Most of my Caribbean travel has been through curating exhibitions for Carifesta, curating Barbados' visual arts exhibition for Carifesta since I took this job in 2002. So, as I said, the Queen's Park Gallery was established in 1984 with the establishment of the National Cultural Foundation. The first curator was Lois Redman Simmons, and she was the one who really did all of the groundwork. Elombe's vision and Lois's vision was that it would be an invitational gallery where you would show only the best. So one couldn't book the Queen's Park Gallery.
Now, some will say, isn't that a little elitist though, Janice?
Well, you call it elitist if you like, but if you want to control the quality, what are you going to do? Because then if it's just open for booking, it is more democratic, yes, but you cannot control the quality of the work that is exhibited.
Do you think that because of that cut off, you're not of that standard? Suppose there were people who just needed a space to start to showcase their artwork. Wouldn't it then limit them to go to another level in terms of, I want to be an artist, but I want to see how my work stands up to critiques? Would that be limiting those people who can't be on the list per se?
No, there's not a list. It is not. And it isn't limiting people because there are exhibitions such as NIFCA, the Barbados Arts Council, is the most democratic organization in Barbados. Once you're a member and you book an exhibition, you can have an exhibition. You might not, in terms of my saying that it's purely invitational, which it was and is you can apply for an exhibition and you would write a letter to the chief executive officer. You would CC me. I would make an appointment to see you and see your work. You might be somebody I never heard of. You might be somebody who I had seen your work elsewhere, and I'm quite familiar with your work. But what has happened on occasion is not that you say to the person flat out, no, this is awful, which I wouldn't do. But because of my background as a teacher, I would use the opportunity to discuss the work with the person. And what I've tried to do as an officer of the NCF is continually meet with people, because there are various artists who come and they talk to me about their work, and I make suggestions about the development of the work and the ways in which it could develop. You might not have enough good works to command a solo show, but that doesn't mean you can't be part of a group show.
May I ask what makes a good piece or a good visual arts collection?
Good piece or good, those are two separate questions.
Okay.
And I think you cannot generalize. It's as though you're saying, what makes a good poem. When one person is trying to write a limerick, which is a poem too, and somebody else is trying to write an epic, like the Odyssey.
Yeah.
So you can't make a generalized statement. It depends on what the person is attempting to do, how far they go with it. And what mainly I would say I'm looking for competence, an actual competent skill. I'm looking for something original, something different. And this applies to, because we exhibit both art and craft and design work. So I'm looking for something that is an original vision, that is not referencing too much existing work. Because I'll give you an example. There was, and people are often recommended to me for, say, group exhibitions like the Art Supermarket. And this particular individual was recommended to me as a very good jewelry maker. That she did nice jewelry and her work sold very well within her office, because she worked in an office, and the person who recommended her to me was an artist who also worked in that office. And I saw the work, and the work was indeed very well made, but it was chronically boring. It wasn't interesting in the slightest. It was well made technically, but it was just visually not interesting, which means it was not that well designed, or it would be visually interesting. So I'm just giving you those as examples. In terms of making a good collection, the collection would vary according to what your interest is and what it is you're after. Because there are some people who, they only want contemporary work in their collection. There are other people, because sometimes I'm asked to consult with collectors. Collectors ask me to consult and give my opinion on whether they should purchase a piece of work or not, if it would fit in with their collection. Now, there's some collectors who are collecting, you could say, the history of Barbadian art. So they are trying to collect outstanding pieces by artists who, in some cases, in most cases, are already well known. But in other cases, I might say to the person, well, you know, this artist is not well known. Their work is outstanding, and they're very promising. So they are in years to come. And that promising doesn't mean the person is 22. The person might be 62. But you're...
In terms of skill.
No, not in terms of skill, in terms of being known. Because you could be sitting at home, quietly painting, never exhibiting, doing your own thing for your own pleasure. You might be developing very well because you're looking at your education is coming through seeing a lot of exhibitions. You might not have a teacher or a mentor, but yet your work is developing and your work reaches a very high standard. But you're not sharing it with anybody. You've chosen, for whatever reason, not to exhibit. But that person's work might be worth having because it's very good. And it certainly is going to become appreciated in time.
Are there others who have been curating specifically over, let's say, the past, 5 years or so?
There's some curators, Barbadian curators, who may not have been curating in Barbados for that period of time. But Natalie Mcguire is one, and she had been out of the island for quite a bit. And she has curated exhibitions. Neris Redder recently returned, and Neris curated work in the gallery, in the Carifesta exhibition. And there are others. But I think in most cases, most of our curators are not trained as curators. We're either art historians who are having a concept and you're trying to tell a story through the exhibition, but you might not have gone and done a degree in curatorship.
A little bit earlier, you spoke about being a teacher back in the days before you became a full-fledged curator.
Yes.
And also, I know a little bit of you being at BCC. Could you tell us a little bit about your life as an educator?
I was always, from the time I was a very small child, as I told you, I had work in the exhibition, the annual industrial exhibition as a small child. And art has always been my great love. And I knew from day one, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an artist. I'm interested in working with art. That is my love. So, as I went through secondary school, no one could deter me from it. I won a Barbados scholarship, and I was the first person who ever did a Barbados scholarship in the visual arts and the history of Barbados.
Wow.
And my parents received a lot of criticism for this. Why are you letting her do that? She could do medicine, she could do law. They said, but she wants to do art. That's what she's interested in. She's not interested in going to Oxford University. She's interested in going to somewhere that does practical visual arts. That is her dream, has always been her dream. And to their credit, they didn't stand in my way and say, well, this is a heap of garbage. They did say, how are you going to earn a living? Yes. And I said, well, I'll probably teach. And I will continue to do my art. So I went off and to the University of Newcastle, and I did my degree in fine art there. And I met and married a fellow artist, Nick Whittle. I did not go to university to meet a husband, let me hasten to say. And we returned to Barbados when we graduated. Okay. Well, after I graduated, because he was the year ahead of me. So we returned to Barbados and we entered the teaching profession. Well, I was at home with the kids for a little while. And what I found during that experience of having children, and the children are very enthused about assisting you with your work. So for me, I was a painter and an art historian. That is what I specialize in, painting and art history. And I got into textiles and jewelry after I came back, because that is something, when you have small children, that you can do, say, you can do silk painting, you might be able to do some jewelry and put it down and go back, as opposed to painting a picture. I found that was more possible for me, though, my husband continued to paint his pictures. Anyway, so we both got into teaching, and we felt very strongly, for us it was like a missionary zeal, because art within our school, the attitude that people had when I, as a Barbados scholar, chose to study visual arts and use that scholarship to get a degree in visual arts. That told me a lot, because there was a great deal of hostility in the general community that I did.
Still is a little bit.
Well, there you go, because in my teaching, we would have very talented students, and the parents would say, well, you have to drop all of that when you get higher up the school. So as a result of that, we gave after-school classes for free. So that our science students, or language students, who were good in art and wanted to continue with their art, they, did after-school art with us.
Now, where visual art is concerned, when you go to buy a piece of art, some people will be like, well, I don't know if I want to buy a piece for $5,000 or $2,000. When I did so for $300, I got to go and late bill late. I got things tight. I can't afford to go and do all of that. Yeah. Or, on the really dark side, people don't see a need for it at all. They just think that you should have a fete to have a good time, and that's it. Nobody looks at the intricacies of what the other types of art can provide for the spirit. What do you think can persuade people to know that art is important and it should be a part of our communities?
Well, I think as teachers, we did a lot of that. And a lot of our students have gone on to continue to fight that fight, like Onika, Juliana Innes, Jason Hope, Melanie Brown, who's now Melanie D'Oliveira, who just won a big award in NIFCA, and several at Stella Hackett. Lots of them have continued to work. Rodney Eiffel is one of our students. So when you teach, that is the beauty of teaching. You are able to influence young minds, and they in turn influence other young minds. And I think the more you expose people to the visual arts through exhibitions and having wall texts and doing guided tours through exhibitions and talking about the work, then the visitors will see what it is they're getting out of it. And what would do even more for the audience to get something out of the artwork is if we had a national gallery.
What, to your mind, makes you think that there isn't a national art gallery? Because this has been under discussion now for many, many, many years.
Well, the major thing I think is financial. I think we are caught up in the idea that it must be a specific building that we have and working with that. But there are many people who think we should just make a start, rent somewhere and put up some work. And what I want to do, because I represent the NCF on the National Art Gallery Board, is to make the public more familiar with the work in the National Collection. So I want to have, during the course of the year, exhibitions of work from the National Collection that you can come in and see it, and another time some of the same work might be exhibited. And, you know, people get familiar with it. Just like they have a favorite calypso, they will have a favorite painting. What I would say, that one of the, to me, an odd thing that I discovered when I was teaching is that maybe because it's of our history of being enslaved, and the fact that Barbados is small, it's not mountainous though it's hilly, and we have lots of gullies, it was difficult to escape from the plantation. And really, after abolition, you were staying in the same spot.
Yes.
You had a different status, but essentially you were staying in the same spot. So the dynamics of the relationship between the enslaved and the owners changed, maybe only subtly. Because of that, I found that when I taught, a lot of the children, their parents did not view them as being really good artists unless they could paint a landscape well. Okay. So there's something about that being able to represent the land that has another resonance than, say, being a portrait painter.
Or even abstract.
Right, or whatever. But that whole thing about being able to do landscape somehow has caught into the public imagination, and people believe in that.
Have you seen a lot of potential at the BCC works? I know there was an exhibition showcase on the BCC premises, actually all over BCC. We were up there. There was like numerous paintings, visual artists.
Regional exhibition as well as the local exhibitions.
Did you see anything that caught your attention? Any new artists now coming out of BCC?
Well, I saw some nice work. I saw some interesting work. Some of them would have been new to me, and I might not necessarily remember the name, but there are others who I would have seen their work over time because they might have participated in Crop Over or NIFCA or whatever. And I think it is the important thing that I think most young contemporary artists have to bear in mind is, what is the actual idea you're trying to convey? What are you working with? Are you simply being contemporary for contemporary's sake? And you really have not got something to say. The important thing is having something that you are trying to convey and questioning yourself as you go along. Don't just, it looks contemporary, so it must be contemporary. Because some work is, that you can get traditional work that is quite shallow, just like you would get shallow poetry. And you can get some contemporary work that is also shallow, that's trying to pull the wool over somebody's eyes. So you have to dig deep and try to understand the intention behind what the person is doing, but be willing to work with it. I always give the example in terms of contemporary work or abstraction, that when I was teaching, we would allow the students to have in the art room, bring their own music and play music. So they'd be listening to dub music, and I wouldn't have a clue what they were saying. And a younger member of staff came by and said, "Do you know what's being said in that dub song that you're letting these children play here?" And I said, "No, I haven't got a clue." Anyway, the children loved it. And this playing of dub, most of it was in a language I didn't understand. In the same way that when I listen to opera, it's in a language I don't understand mostly. It's either Italian, German, whatever. So I think that the general public should approach challenging work in art in the same way. I was listening to the music, I enjoyed the rhythm, I just liked how it sounded, and I was going with it. I was moved by the opera because of the dramatic element, which was giving me clues as to what the story was, and the music itself was deeply moving. So even though I had not a clue what was being said in either, they were both valid, and I worked with it, and I allowed myself to be suffused by what I was hearing. And that's what the general public has to do when they see non-representational work. And what I find in general is that they do.
Now, for those artists, contemporary artists here in Barbados who want to get in contact with you so that their work can be vetted and possibly put up in the Queen's Park Gallery, how do they get in contact with Janice Whittle?
Well, they can call me at 429-3117, area code 246, They can write to me at Janice_Whittle@Outlook.com.
Are there any exhibitions we should be aware of that are coming up?
Yes, in December, starting on the 11th of December, that's the opening. It's a Sunday, and it's from 11 to 2. Is the Art Supermart, which is our affordable art exhibition. No work in that exceeds $500 Barbados dollars.
I'll be there buying some art. Okay. Guys, she gave you all of the information which you should go and check out. Contact Janice. Come on down to the art supermarket. I've been to a couple and there's some really, really good pieces. Even if you want to be a part of the art supermarket and you might not think that you might be ready for a big exhibition, you could come on down to the art supermarket and get some really cool art. There's art everywhere in Barbados, and I think you should go and give it a chance if you've never ever gone down to one. Guys, my name is Empress Zingha. This is GineOn Magazine. Don't forget to subscribe down below, and I can see you somewhere sometime soon. Bye.